And good afternoon again from Pittsburgh, a currently dry Pittsburgh. Last night, for those of you in other places in America and around the world, we had 4 hours of continual thunder and lightning and torrential downpours and more trees coming down. But don't tell me there's no climate change. There most certainly is. But anyway, welcome. I hope you're all out there. And those of you who aren't all out there but are joining us on our YouTube channel, hello to you as well. And I've just noticed a thing, and I'm going to have to correct that thing right now. So excuse me while I stand up. There we are. Here we are. I'm back again. This just proves that this is all live and real, because I left my radio on, and you would have heard it going on in the background. We couldn't have that, could we? So anyway, here I am back again, and welcome again. And if you're out there, do say hi, because it's always nice to see who's out there. And you can use the chat, as you know, to talk to me, to talk to one another, and do the usual thank yous. There's Marlene. Hi there. Early for a change. Bless you, Marlene. You're always there, regardless of how early you arrive. Hello from James in White Oak. Always there again. I love the regulars coming back. Shelley, hello. Back from South Dakota. I bet you're glad to be back from South Dakota. At least it wasn't North Dakota. Hello, Grace there in Dublin. Breezy Friday. At least the rain is warm. Here, the rain can actually be quite hot. Hello, James from Crafton, another regular. A regular live viewer, as opposed, and by the way, I'm not suggesting we have dead viewers. I'm simply saying those who view the live broadcast. Hello, Robert from Shadyside. Yes, indeed. It's interesting. Pittsburgh at the moment is warmer than parts of Florida. And I'm delighted to say that. Although I think we're getting a tad more rain. Although there's a hurricane coming up the coast, or at least a tropic storm coming up the coast of Florida at the moment. So maybe they are getting a lot more rain than we are. Hello, David. Dry in your part of the UK. Good. Rain and torrential rain is something we're going to have to get used to. Hello, Helen from Shadyside, waiting for another raindrop. Yes, I think it's going to be later this evening. I think we're going to get another belt of it at around 6 o'clock. But for the moment, it's okay. I should always warn you, when we're having these thunderstorms and things here, it's very possible, and it has happened on a few occasions, when we lose power. So if we suddenly disappear from your screen for no apparent reason, it's because the gods of nature have decided they don't want to listen to me anymore and have switched off our power. But hopefully that won't happen. And as I say, we're not forecast anything more until this evening. So today's topic, there it is, Ibsen, the public enemy. Doesn't refer to Ibsen as the public enemy, but we'll come to that. I am joined by the redoubtable Martin Giles, and we're going to be talking about this particular play. We talked to Marty a few weeks back, you may remember. Hello, Rebecca. As usual, in the preamble, I want to say thank you to the Allegheny Foundation, because they have sponsored this year's series of webinars, and hopefully will sponsor next year's as well. I want to, yes, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel for all our latest updates, and also because you can watch any of these webinars that we've given. They're all there on the YouTube channel. You can go back, check out whether you thought I was talking nonsense or not. You can argue with me, and you can send me your opinions, and I'll always try to respond to them. And also you can make a donation. And as I've said before, we're coming into now our 25th anniversary season. Big things, the biggest thing being that we're actually going to be able to go back on stage live. It's already beginning to happen through Pittsburgh and across the country. Due to our organizational situation, we won't be back on stage until end of October. but we're building up for it now. So any donation really does help. And I do encourage you, no matter how small that donation is, it makes an important difference. And every dollar you send to us, we spend on the production of theatre. That's what we do with the money. So any donation, any small donation, mid-size, big donation, it goes towards the presentation of theatre, which also includes the employment of artists, the actors, the designers, senior constructor, everything. That's what your donations go for. We use foundation money and other money to help run the company, but your donations put plays on the stage. So do consider sending something. And as I say, $5, €5, whatever your currency is, no matter how little it is, I'd prefer more, obviously. Whatever you're thinking of sending, think of adding another 25% to celebrate our 25th anniversary. But every dollar counts. And I am truly grateful to everybody who does support us. How are we doing? Oh, we've got to wait for the latecomers. We always have to wait for the latecomers. It's always true in theatre. Have you ever noticed? The curtain never goes up on time. It's always 5 minutes late because somebody had difficulty parking or somebody had to use the restroom at the last minute. So we'll give them an extra minute or two. And next week, by the way, I'll give you an advance warning. Next week, we're going to be talking about Sean O'Casey, the great Irish playwright. I'll give you more information about that at the end of this week's webinar, but just a little advance warning. Next week, we'll be talking about Sean O'Casey and a particular one of his plays, just as this week we're talking about a particular one of Ibsen's plays. So how are we doing? Oh, look, let's get started. If they're late, they're late. So this week, that particular public enemy, as I said, a few weeks ago, we discussed the influence on European playwriting of somebody who I would have considered one of the most significant playwrights at the end of the 19th century. And a gentleman, as we said, the man from the far north, from one of the most northern parts of Europe. Henrik Ibsen had a huge effect on the development of theatre, particularly late 19th and into the 20th century of European theatre, and in consequence, an effect on American theatre. The effect, as I say, reached way beyond his homeland, and it also, I believe, helped other writers in other societies to move to a new kind of realism concerning social and socio-political issues that were not normally addressed in the theatre of his time. He was, in that sense, an adventurer and a revolutionary. So this week's webinar, I am joined by Pittsburgh actor and director and passionate, dare I say, exponent of Ibsen's works, Mr. Martin Giles. Now, Martin's love of and experience with the plays of Ibsen will, I hope, help give us a glimpse into the importance of this one of Ibsen's most, as I mentioned before, most important socio-political plays. Now, it's variously translated. One of the difficulties with Ibsen is translating from the Norwegian is not an easy task. And very often we don't have exactly a word in English to match the Norwegian equivalent. I am told, in fact, I was told by an old friend of mine who actually spoke fluent Norwegian and did a literal translation of this play for me, that there sometimes are, all the things are making noises today, sorry about that, that'll stop. Different plays end up with strange titles. And this one is usually translated in one of two ways, either a public enemy or an enemy of the people. Means the same thing. Means the same thing very specifically. Either way, with either translated title, you get the point. The hero of the play is in fact considered a villain by the people. So who are the people in question? And to answer that question, let's ask Martin Giles to join us for his opinion. Martin.
Oh, hello. Hi. I was just boning up. Good to see you.
How circumspect of you. There we are. There's the question. We have a play called An Enemy of the People.
Right.
It really begs a question before you even look into the play itself, because the play, to a large extent, explains it. But who are the people in a real sense?
By the end of the play, the people are pretty much everybody, except the people that are in the room with Stockman at the end of the play, which are his family members and Captain Horster, whose house he's going to go live in. So, the thing that's interesting about what the progress of Stockman through the play is that he's affiliated with certain people, then he's affiliated with certain other people, and by the end of the play, he ends up, as he proudly declares, the strongest man is the one who's alone. So he becomes an enemy, ironically, to just about everybody.
At the beginning of the play,
conservatives and liberals, established people, the establishment, and the
I suppose
plebs, as they call them. So,
I suppose that the point I'd love to make is the people are us, because when you have it in a situation, and for those who don't know the play, it is a simple proposition. You have a local doctor in a small town that has discovered wonderful restorative values in the water. It builds a spa. Then the doctor realizes that the water is in fact infected, and that they built the spa too cheaply, too closely to the town. They need to rebuild and move it beyond what was basically a slurry dump from a local tannery.
Right.
He begins the play as a hero, but as people slowly become aware of the effect this change is going to have on them, they shift from pro-doctor to anti-doctor in ever increasing numbers. So the hero of the people, the man who discovered the health of the health potential,
which saves an otherwise declining town too. It's one of those, everybody gets to be employed. Rich people get richer. Right.
Restaurants, cafes. We know what happens. When it's a boom, it's a sudden boom moment.
It's like fracking, actually.
Yeah, it's like fracking. Yeah. But you have this amazing shift of beginning as a hero and ending as a villain, as far as the people are concerned. And I'm using the term villain not because he is evil, but because people's perception of him, of what he is doing, is that he becomes their enemy.
He's trying to destroy them.
So at the time he wrote the play, do we know what the reaction was like?
Well, it's interesting because this play follows him very quickly after Ghosts. In fact, this play was written really fast, and I think one of the scholars says something about without his usual 18 months of cud chewing, because he was famous for, after publishing a play, he was famous for just sitting around for a year and a half thinking about the next one, and then finally putting pen to paper. So this one followed on really fast, and a lot of people think that it's that the vitriol in this play, the Stockman's eventually in the fourth act, Stockman just lets fly at everybody, right? Is Ibsen yelling at all the reaction to Ibsen's reaction to Ghosts, to the reaction to Ghosts, actually, because it was vicious, and he was reviled, and he was called a pervert, and he was called sick and depraved, and it was just so the reaction to that was really strong. By contrast, the reaction to this play was not quite as strong because there were some people who really really liked it. Part of the reason for that being is that in many ways it's one of his most sort of accessible and compulsive plays. It's actually, I'm sure you intended to talk about this later, but it's actually a comedy, and he himself considered it a comedy. It's a comedy in the way that Aristophanes' plays are comedies, and like political comedies. They're meant to like shake things up in the city, in the polis, right?
Yeah.
So,
you're right.
but there was still, the reaction was really mixed, probably more towards the negative, going, oh yeah, he hates everybody. He's he bashed these people, now he's taking a turn to bash these people. And,
yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I will bring up that later on, but
right.
It is almost that definition of comedy and tragedy, that a tragedy is a farce happening to someone. Sorry, a tragedy is a farce happening to someone else. It is tragic, but in the way that he goes through it, the discoveries he makes, the realizations, the exposures of other people is almost borderline farce. And I would argue that the third act that takes place at Printers is pure farce, with people coming in and out of doors and mistaking who's where and what.
Yeah, you point out the third act, but actually the structure of the first act, the structure is actually sort of very well-made, wonderfully well-made play. It's almost like a little well-made play of itself. But the structure of the other four acts are, and it might be interesting to talk about why it's 5 acts too at some point, but which is unusual for Ibsen. But the structure of the other four acts is definitely comedic. It just has these like bizarre, one weird person entering, having a scene, exiting another weird person. It has this wonderful.
Well, I'll come to that again when we talk about some of the characters within it. But to come back to that initial point, and you made the point yourself, the social influences, I mean, in Norway at the time, but also pretty much all over Europe, because we were still talking about imperial Europe. There were still crowned heads and governing most countries.
Yes.
The Habsburgs and the Hanoverians and there were, I think, just about every country except France had a crowned head at that particular point. So we were talking about a very conservative world where liberal thinking was considered dangerous.
Yes.
So interestingly, in this play, he also introduces the thing of the liberal press. This is where I think it is comedic in the Aristotelian sense, that he introduces a liberal press that is dedicated to the removal of this conservative, authoritarian local government, which is parallel to liberal press and liberal thinking throughout Europe, wanting to remove the authoritarian states that, the classic thing of the assassination of Franz Ferdinand at Sarajevo, to bring down the Habsburg Empire and allow the people to govern. So you had in sort of microcosm that same thing, but Ibsen being Ibsen doesn't leave it at that, because even the press, surprisingly enough, can be corrupted. And he does manage to introduce, within the politics of the play, he does manage to introduce a theme where just about everybody's opinion can be corrupted through self-interest.
Yes. Which is why that both structurally and thematically, the third act is so wonderfully farcical, because it's in that act that all of that happens, right? That the people that the liberal-minded people actually, we find out, are easily cowed. That they're cowardly, and that they're really worried about themselves and worried about their own little niche and their own little power base. And
he does
their own income. basically. Their income gets threatened.
Well, that's the point. And to come back to the thing you mentioned earlier, that with the discovery of this wonderful water and with the building of a spa, a town that had become moribund, that was dying, suddenly finds, just like with fracking or any other new industry that can develop, suddenly a town finds life. And when we say a town finds life, a town now is the people that live within it. Mm-hmm. That all their prospects suddenly reverse, that where they were in decline, suddenly there is that potential for growth and wealth and a redevelopment
and with the characters in this play, we get a sketch of the entire breadth and scope of the social structure of the town. So so there is this little ruling elite, right? The 1%, right?
Yeah.
That the liberals want to take down, right? And then there are the represented by the newspaper people. There are the liberal thinkers, right? The revolutionaries, right? It's people who want to turn the world, knock those people off their pedestal and redistribute the wealth, right? And then there are also the sort of the middle class people, the small businesses, the shop holders, who of course have an organization, right? They have a sort of a guild, right? A committee. So and of course the baths benefit everybody. The rich people, of course, get benefited the most because they're all shareholders and they make all the money. But the poorer people who might be represented by the liberal press get to work there, right? They get to mop up, right? They get to take tickets. They get whatever, right? They're employed, and because they're employed, they have money and they spend money in the shops. So the people in the middle class. So the prosperity of the baths affects the prosperity of the entire town, and everybody has a stake in them succeeding. Right?
Yeah.
Or failing.
It is a kind of microcosm of any situation in any town. I mean, the town of Dr. Stockman is any town,
right,
that has found a new way of coming back to life.
Yes.
That the whole community invests in, and I think that's the important point, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That the bars and the spa, the whole thing that's happening, all instigated by Dr. Stockman, has become an investment by the community. It is, even though they're not all shareholders, as you say, the middle class is going to benefit because they will have guest houses and restaurants and all the other things. The working classes will benefit because there will suddenly be jobs where there weren't jobs before.
Right. Everybody gets to make a living.
Yeah. So the play can open with the title Hero of the People. Dr. Stockman has actually created all of this by his discovery.
Right.
So let's just take, I want to look at some of the characters, because really, I suppose I am fairly obviously trying to draw parallels, but which we will come to. But if you look at the characters, Stockman himself, a doctor, a medic, a respected, a researcher, one of those people who he himself had lived in poverty in a horrible place, came back to his own town, made this discovery, suddenly became the hero.
Well, actually, he doesn't he make the discovery while he's living in the horrible place?
That's right. Yeah.
While he's living up north in what he calls exile.
Yeah.
Right. And in poverty.
Yeah.
So he has this interest in.
He's invested as well. He's part of that community, which is
it's his idea, but he also has become, and he expresses a great deal of pleasure in having money, being able to buy a new hat, or having plenty of food on the table at any hour of the day. So he's
a very important
he
point.
Too is really invested in it. Right?
Yeah. So then you have what we might call the head of the political situation in town. The mayor is also his brother,
Peter
Stockman. One of the nastiest pieces of work, in the sense that he will, once the doctor makes the discovery that there is disease, that there is infection, Peter will do anything in his power to stop that information getting out. So we would consider him corrupt, which he is. But also that Ibsen very cleverly puts forward the argument within that he is protecting the town. He is saving the town. Now, what he's also saving are the investors.
Well, he believes in that. He actually really honestly believes in that social structure, in the current social structure. In fact, he says something in the play to the effect of like, we don't need new ideas, and certainly the people don't need new ideas. They need to, they need to really embrace the good old ones. Those are the ones that have really worked. Right?
And so in our day and age, we recognize that phrase constantly.
Yeah,
it's all around us. We don't need newfangled thinking. Right. What was good enough for our fathers and grandfathers is perfectly good enough for us, and all of that.
Peter's more complicated than just being corrupt, because he's corrupt in the sense that he'll do anything to keep his position and to keep the status quo, but he believes in it. So he's actually so he's sincere, he's genuine, he has a certain kind of weird integrity.
Which is part and parcel of Ibsen not giving us easy answers.
No.
Because he wants us to see ourselves.
Yeah.
You get the two characters of Hofstad and Billing, the liberal press.
Right.
And they really, apart from being delighted about the effect that it's going to be on the town, but once this revelation becomes clear that the water is in fact being corrupted by the channel they've taken through this swamp.
Cheap and easy. They did the cheap and easy build instead of
cheap and easy rather than costly and pure.
Right.
But once the press get a wind of this, they now see this no longer as just simply reporting fact, but as an opportunity for bringing down the establishment.
Right.
Which I love, because Ibsen is setting up a noble endeavor from the free press.
So we should say that Stockman has discovered the poisoning, the flaw in the thing, right? And he's going to expose it.
Yeah, to answer that question that's just come up, is Stockman not the medical authority for the spa? Yeah, he has. Yes. It is his
absolutely
job.
Right. He's the medical officer at the spa.
That's right, and it's his responsibility to give the advice to the town, to the council, to say, this is infected, this is not going to work. You dug the channel too close to the infected area of soil. You've got to move it. Stockman is just doing his job.
Well, he's also, and it was, you were talking about his character, is that he is also in many ways a naive person.
Yeah.
And but he is also scrupulously honest. His interest in things is he has this sort of idealized scientific view, which is in the truth, right? That's the only thing that matters, the truth. And the truth is that the waters of the baths are being polluted, and they're therefore harmful to people using them. And so, of course, without question, this must be exposed and fixed, changed. It's not like he wants to destroy the baths. He actually has a solution. It's just going to cost a lot of money that they should have spent in the first place instead of cutting corners.
And now they're going to have to spend more than they would have spent in the first place to put the thing right. But it is about dealing with the truth. Always a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
The liberal press will always leap to that defense.
Right. So they're behind him. They're on his side. They're pushing him forward. Right.
Yeah. So then, also, you mentioned the middle class, the tradesmen, the shopkeepers, and the things, represented by the printer as Slackson,
right?
Who I love as a character.
He's a great character.
He's somewhere between your favorite shopkeeper and Uriah Heep from David Cotton. He is perpetually humble, perpetually respectful of A, the community, and B, those who lead the community. They know better than us. It is that terrible deference paid to people with more money and slightly better education. But he's behind the Doctor completely initially, because it's for the benefit of the town. If people start dying in the spa, all the guest houses and restaurants will close. So he doesn't want that to happen.
Right.
So you've got, with the exception of the mayor, you have the liberal press, you have the what we might call the middle class strata of society, and we know
politically is somewhere in the middle, right? Because he himself continually is saying moderation. Everything should be in moderation.
Moderation, always moderation.
Always moderation.
And then there's one other interesting character who is also related to the Doctor through marriage.
Oh yes,
and that is Martin Giles,
definitely.
who is the father of Stockman's wife,
right?
And he is a major investor in the spa. So he represents, as you've got Peter Stockman representing the political side of the town, Slackson representing the middle class part of the town, Martin Giles represents the old money in the town, the true wealth in the town.
He's also incredibly what are the right words to use for him? Well, the one thing, he's completely unprincipled and impossibly ignorant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which we should recognize a lot nowadays, right? I mean, to see rich old guys who have no principles and are incredibly ignorant. Who could we possibly be thinking of?
Total lack of principle, old money, and also totally behind the Doctor, purely because it's vindictive. He just wants to screw with all those people who didn't like him.
Yeah. And well, he got pushed out of. I think he was the chairman of the was he the chairman of the Baths Committee, and then Peter Stockman, the brother, and also the mayor.
Yeah.
So and his faction pushed Giles out because he was old and incredibly ignorant.
But the point about Ibsen's use of the structure of the play, I think, is that Stockman's support at the beginning of the play isn't because he's right, isn't because he's honest, isn't because he's true. Everybody who supports him for their own specific purposes.
Yes.
It's nothing to do with making the world healthy. No. It's to do with how much can I make out of it, or how much more secure can I be because of it, or what does it mean for me? Now, if we don't believe this is true, ask yourself about the major shareholders in Pfizer or Moderna or any other drug company. I know we use the drug companies as a sort of whipping horse, but they deserve it. But
thinking about the drug companies, especially in terms of the opioid problem.
Yeah.
It's a perfect parallel.
Yeah. So again, we're talking about Ibsen's structure, and coming back to your point, as I say, I think Act 3 is a perfect farce, but the whole play follows that Aristotelian rule of comedy, that everything seems okay, then somebody comes in and it changes, and then somebody else comes in and it changes again. And he is doing this, as you say, throughout the play. You mentioned the interest about it being a 5-act play. Do you want to comment on that?
Right. Well, it's unusual for the plays in the cycle, right, which begins with Pillars of Society and goes to When We Dead Awake, and those 12, quote unquote realist plays with which he made most of his mark and kind of changed theater completely. And actually changed a lot of ways of thinking in the West in the early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century. Yeah, it's interesting that it's that most of his plays are 3 acts or 4 acts, and people talk about him as having, writing wedding these perfectly well-made plays. So to me, it's just, why is there a 5th act? Why is it 5 acts? Why is this play 5 acts, especially after the incredibly skillful plays before it? And I think this play is the 4th play in a little sort of subset of those plays, of those 12 plays. The first 4 plays are kind of social realist plays, right? Pillars of Society, and then of course Doll's House and Ghosts, and this one kind of ends that. And then the next play is The Wild Duck, in which we kind of wander into weirdness, right? It's not as external as it becomes more internal, right? It becomes more about individuals. And the first 4 plays are all about, in a lot of ways, the importance of knowing yourself and becoming an individual so that you can be responsible in society and making society a better society, right? The 5th, to me, the 5 acts are just an interesting. How much do you want me to talk about this? Because I could go on. To me, the 5 acts are really interesting because it's they're shorter and they're more compact, and to me that just kind of makes it's just useful for the comedy. It gives it this kind of tension and compactness, and as we were talking about, the way the acts are structured with people coming in, playing a little scene. These little really impactful little scenes, leaving, another person coming in, right? It's this wonderful parade of it's interesting. It's kind of like As You Like It, in the way that it's kind of like a series of sketches, in a way, a series of comedy sketches.
Yeah, but that's where I want to agree with you. Yeah. That to me, it wasn't his normal formula in the great 12 final plays. No. But in a way, each scene, each act of the play is an encapsulation of a concept, of an idea. As we go through the play, that idea gets developed and gets developed and gets developed through the medium of the comedic medium of moments of revelation that change things. Right. It's almost Shakespearean.
It's almost Shakespearean, yeah.
Almost Shakespearean. We look at Shakespeare always in a 5-act concept.
Like a Shakespeare comedy, yeah.
And it's like a Shakespeare comedy in that sense. And even the characters, as in Shakespeare, are always drawn just a little bit in the extreme, so that you're never in doubt as to who they really are.
And I would actually say not a little bit, necessarily, in this play especially. But yeah, so there's that sort of snappy urgency to the action, but the fact that the play is longer, or just by number of acts, not necessarily longer in the time it takes to perform it, but in the number of acts, is that it also gives it this sense of reach, right? That it's taking time, that a lot of things are happening, and that there are depths beyond just what you would normally get from a comedy in the theater, especially at the time.
Which is why I say that, I mean, as you say, the first 4 of that 12-play cycle were much more sociological.
Right.
Where am I in society? Whereas this play in this center group is, what is society doing to me, in a way, and what is society doing?
It's why it's the perfect sort of end to the first 4 plays, right? And
it's a coda to the first 4 and the beginning of the next 4.
One of the scholars that I was Brian Johnston, who is a great Ibsen scholar, who actually was taught at CMU for a long time, but he calls it the satyr play. At the, like the way the Greeks would do at the end of after a tragedy, right? So after the tragedy of Ghosts, right, and the sort of overall tragic feeling of the first 3 of the 4 plays, that An Enemy of the People is the satyr play, the comedy that finishes the evening, that finishes that portion of the cycle.
He even ends the play on a note of hope rather than despair, which.
Yes, yeah, because it goes into the future, which is why, to me, there's a fifth act. Right? It's the really crazy, farcical third act, where people are going in and out of different doors, as you've pointed out before, and some people are hiding in other rooms while scenes are happening and overhearing things, and then then there's the really silly little struggle over the mayor's hat and stick. Right? That's a great, really great shtick in there. Right in the middle of the play, right? The fourth act is, of course, the explosion, where Stockman is actually quite extreme. And this is something that I think we didn't mention when we talked about Stockman's characters. That he is an excessive person. Right?
Oh, yeah.
He loves life. He loves to eat. He has this sort of youthful zest, right? He likes having young people around him.
His punch, the whole thing. Yeah.
Right. So the fact of having a fifth act is that, yes, so Stockman arrives at something in the fourth act after all the revelations of the third act, right? And then he actually arrives at something else in the fifth act. He changes. He changes again. So between the third act and the fourth act, he has a revelation and he changes. And between the fourth act and the fifth act, he has another revelation and changes again. And so the fifth act does the fact of having a fifth act leads us to openness, leads us to a to right?
Yeah.
And also leads us to the wild duck, right? It's like, okay, we're done with this. we're done with this. I'm done writing these social realist plays, and now I'm going to go even deeper and into.
I'm agreeing completely with what you're saying. Robert makes a point there. The 5-act format refer back to Shakespearean comedy, in which I can't quite see the end of that.
He's saying in the middle of the act 3 is the casket scene in Merchant of Venice is what he's using as an example.
Which gets referred back to into the 5th act.
Which I think is what we're.
I think that's pretty much the same thing, and that's why I think I can safely risk the comment that the play is Shakespearean in its structure and format.
And obviously Robert's point is really good in the sense that there's a sort of crazy parallel between the casket scene in Merchant of Venice and the third act in the newspaper office. With all the doors and comment and shtick going on.
Now, I want to come to one other character I haven't mentioned, because she leads me to the conclusion I want to get to, and that's Petra, the daughter.
Right.
And she is a fascinating character because she is the new woman. She's almost the result, to my mind, she's the result of Nora walking out the door in Gull's house. She is a young woman in a society where she should be nice, polite, dressed neatly, and don't interrupt the men. And yet she is saying, no, I am it's like Jane Eyre. I'm an independent woman, and I
have my own soul.
I had my own soul. Right. Totally devotee of her father, totally a devotee of the truth, but also a devotee of education. And as you point out,
which becomes absolutely essential at the end of the play.
By the end of the play, it is not about truth merely, but it is about education and Stockman's decision. He's going to stay. He's going to find kids who can't go to school, who wouldn't go to school, and he's going to educate them. He's going
one of his big revelations from Act 4 to Act 5 is that the truth changes.
Yes. Another important
something
point.
That even the most open-minded and forward and free-thinking person has lived by certain truths. Those truths will change, and if you're going to remain open-minded and forward-thinking I think he says something like after 7 or 8 years, the truths will change.
Isn't it the same as the meme that you keep seeing? What was it? Religion gives you answers that can never be questioned, and science gives you questions that must be answered. And that's the point, that the scientific mind, which he is very proud of having, constantly asks questions.
And which
he would
keeps
always-
him from being slavishly affiliated to any political party, right?
Yes, precisely.
Or to any social movement, to any.
Yeah.
uh,
So
it's like-
Petra, as a character, Ibsen is drawing on the potential future, isn't he?
Yes.
Because she is somebody who is willing to look at new thoughts, new ideas. She is not willing to be corrupted.
Yes.
She is not willing to be affected by flattery, which in the case of Hofstad, who really wants to be closer to her.
Yes. And so does Billing, right?
And Billing, they all
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
her. She won't be corrupted by somebody like her grandfather, Morton Keel. And neither will Stockman. You know the interesting thing about this play, and I'll just come on to the social point.
Things.
One of the interesting things about this play, you have an incredibly outspoken woman with Petra, a very independent-minded, outspoken, forward-thinking, modern woman.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Katrina, Stockman's wife, who never seems to rise above a weary acceptance that her husband is a bit mad.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with
Good.
that. Well, I wouldn't call it a weary acceptance. I think that's really what the difference.
Well, the number of times she says, "Oh, Thomas," is
yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, I think the important thing is the acceptance. Is that she kind of holds everything together in a way. She reminds me of I can't think of the character's name, but she reminds me a little bit of the woman who runs the boarding house in Joe Turner's Come and Gone, August Wilson play, who's kind of like, she's always there and she's always making sure everything's happening and everything's sort of stable and everything remains, right? She has that. And she is intelligent enough to accept, to agree with Stockman, I think, and to accept. And she just loves him, and she accepts him because she loves him.
It is true, though, or is it, that of the characters, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but she is the least educated.
Possibly, yeah. I think that's probably true. Yeah.
So, is Ibsen giving us a demonstration of what marital love, marital acceptance, marital teamwork? She is, in that sense, I suppose, the flux or the glue that holds it together.
Yeah.
That certainty that he's got some kind of stability that he can go back to.
Yeah, I think there's.
I always maintain that the most underrated character in Pride and Prejudice is Mrs. Bennet.
Yeah, she actually is
the only person who realizes the severity of the problem. And everybody thinks she's an idiot, but she's right.
Well, I think that's Mrs. Stockman is, I think, also sort of quietly and innately intelligent and good-hearted, and open-minded.
I want to come to the political effect of the play, and I'll give you a tiny anecdote. Tiny. I did a production of this many, many years ago for the Irish National Touring Theatre. And so we toured many towns in the country, and my then assistant director took on the task of approaching local newspapers and local authorities to find out whether there were problems of pollution in the local town. And one particular town, and I will not name it, we played in, and we had a big, in the lobby, we did a display of maps and things on local problems and what have you. And on the opening night in one particular town, the mayor came up to me and said, "You realize you've just lost me the next election." And I thought, good. Delighted. Only too pleased to help. But
there are so many stories of after productions of this play around the time of its, within 20, 30 years of its writing, that well, in Russia in 1905, I think there's a great story by Stanislavski about the effect that the play had on the audience before the little revolution in 1905. Mm-hmm. Stanislavski played Stockman, and the the audience. The audience was like, he said that at the end, by the end of the play, there were the audience was people were coming up onto the stage and shaking his hand, and, right? Yeah.
Oh, if only theatre had that effect.
And of course, there were, of course, in Paris, riots. Yeah. There were riots.
Yeah. But if we look at this, you mentioned fracking earlier, and it is a classic case in that fracking for gas has certainly done Pennsylvania a lot of good financially. The state has benefited considerably. Right. Local communities have benefited considerably.
Materially, yes.
Materially.
And that's Ibsen's point and Stockman's point.
The suggestion that we should abandon fracking as a methodology for extracting gas because it's damaging to the environment, it's damaging to it causes earthquakes.
And poisons the water table.
And poisons the water table, is not gaining vast support among those benefiting from the fact that fracking increases income. Yeah. And it is exactly that same argument, isn't it? So Ibsen is simply tapping into possibly the first major play on the topic that you become an enemy of the people very often by telling the truth.
Yes.
Because the people are not bad, but as all the characters in this play have their own reason for supporting the spa.
Sure.
Not because of
and it ends up it ends up, and we see that in Make America Great Again, right? It's like the rich and the working class make this sort of unholy alliance because they're both benefiting from a certain way of thinking and a certain right. And they actually hate each other, but they're
there's a mutual
interest, right?
In terms of income and comfort.
And everyone is afraid of everything falling apart and no one having any money.
So the two great C's of the first quarter of the 20th century are climate and COVID. And they give us an example of enemies of the people. I mean, to a large, not majority, but to a very large minority in America, Dr. Fauci is the enemy of the people. Yeah. Because he's telling the truth. And what's interesting, and again, picking up a point you make, the truth changes.
It changes.
From what we knew a year ago about COVID to what we know today, CDC is constantly changing the methodology.
And they have the hardest time communicating the truth of that, the fact that the truth, that what they know changes, and so that therefore they have to change. Immediately people say, oh, you lied to us before, instead of saying, well, no, we're learning more and we're telling you what we're learning as we learn it. But we didn't know this before now. Yeah. And this is like a conservative point of view, right? Of they should just be happy with the same old ideas, right? Yeah. That have kept us,
and climate change as well is having that deep effect. I mean, any industry that produces or is dependent upon fossil fuels, not only the investors in those industries,
but the
workers in those industries, that, as you say, the two extremes, the Make America Great Again concept, those with everything and those with nothing. Those with everything want more, and those with nothing want something, and they will work together to that. Whereas in the middle, those telling the truth. It's interesting because there is an absolutely perfect role model for Petra in modern day climate change, which is, of course, Greta Thunberg.
Oh, yeah.
She is the Petra of today. She is the one, this child.
I should say the middle is, the middle that you just mentioned is not large, right? And that's a lot of Ibsen's point. It's a few, that's why he goes into that whole third empire of the spirit thing, right? Yeah. Eventually, which is, and that's what happens in Act 5. That's Stockman's realization in Act 5, right? That there really are just a few people who know, and this is where he famously says, the majority is never right, right?
Yeah. Which is
he also
I love
says
that phrase.
he also says the minority is almost never right,
Yeah.
and that it's just a few people who are willing to see and accept what's true, what's true at the moment, and stick to that and advocate for that. And which is why he decides education is.
It has been argued that he takes a somewhat, dare I say, I don't want to use the F word, the F word being fascistic, but he does take that. It's almost Nietzschean. The majority is inevitably wrong. The minority is usually wrong. It is only the individual in the middle who is usually right.
Well, a few individuals.
Or a few individuals.
Right.
Which
who have the potential to be right.
Yeah. But it's a very extreme opinion to take.
That's what he comes to in Act 4, right?
Yeah.
In Act 5, he says, well, what do we do? What do we do then?
Educate others.
And therefore it's education, so that there are not just a few, right? So that the a society is possible. A really working society is only possible if people are educated, right?
Yeah.
And open-minded, and willing to accept the fact that willing to accept the truth of the moment, and that moment is not an eternal moment. It's going to change, and so therefore the truth will change. And and the truth is you've changed with the truth, right? I mean, it's a sort of paradoxical thing.
And in a world that we are constantly surrounded by this fact, it was an accepted fact that heavier than water ships could not float.
Right.
And of course, they were proven right with the Titanic.
Right.
The fact that there are millions of other ships that have floated perfectly well, the fact that it was impossible to fly until, Orville and Wilbur in North Carolina said, well, we just did.
Yeah.
Those who deny that the truth is not the truth, it is a truth now and will change, are denying everything that has existed. Otherwise, we'd still be living in caves and wearing animal skins to keep warm.
Right.
So that's why I one of my things that I find fascinating about the play, yes, Stockman's constant conversion as he realizes more,
right,
as his thoughts take him down a particular channel, and that the answer is education. Petra, to my mind, is the true heroine,
right,
in that she already knew that, in a sense.
Yeah.
And that's why she was teaching. And she was teaching against the opposition of those that were employing her. She was taking risks. That's why I think she is the Greta Thunberg character of the play, because dear young Greta, who just said, I'm sorry, I'm right. The world has got to change. And she said that as a 15-year-old girl, and she's now saying it, or a 14-year-old girl, she's now saying it as an 18-year-old young woman, and she's still right. She is the Petra character in that sense.
It's a couple just really quickly. I know we're almost out of time, but quickly things that Stockman is extreme. Is an extreme person. He's a deeply flawed person, and he in Act 4, the stuff he says, which are generally the things that people react to with aversion, and where they think he's becoming proto-fascist or something, it is much more a character. It's a character thing, and he goes too far. He says more. He's because he's so angry.
Yeah,
and that's again part of Act 5 and his realization. The great thing about Stockman is that he realizes in a couple of places, he makes these huge realizations and changes in himself. Yeah. The other thing that I just wanted to point out again, it's a wonderful irony at the end where he says the strongest man is the man who's alone, and he's standing there with his sons, his wife, his daughter, and Captain Horster, who's probably going to be his daughter's husband later. But
yeah.
they're all there. And the wonderful thing is that Peter Stockman, the mayor, the villain, right, is alone, and he's been alone from the beginning. So
he's the most. He is actually.
There's so much about this play. We've just clipped the surface. It's so complicated.
It's a great introduction to it.
So brilliantly written, and the threads of character and motivation and ideas
in my usual
woven together so skillfully, so brilliant.
My usual definition of a classic is a play true of its time and for all time. I do think most of Ibsen's last 12, and I know you disagree with me and say all of them, but most of Ibsen's last 12 are true classics in that sense.
Absolutely.
But this one, I think, stands out because it's not merely classic for its subject matter, but for its style, its elegance of writing, the nature of its characters. Because in answer to my initial question, who are the people? We all are. Because we all at some point think of our own benefit before we think of the good of all.
And because Ibsen is a wily and funny man, an enemy of the people is ironic.
Yeah,
obviously. Right.
I think if he were looking for a description, self-describing himself, I think he might even consider that title as suitable for him. Henrik Ibsen, Enemy of the People.
Well, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
That's the way he would think. Anyway, Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
I want us to come back again in not too long a time and talk about another. There are two others of his plays that I really want to talk about, and so we'll bring you back in a few weeks' time, and we'll talk about another one of those. In the meantime, thank you.
Thank you.
To everybody else joining us today, thank you for being with us. Just a quick word, as usual. My usual thanks again to Allegheny Foundation. My usual request: do go on to our YouTube channel. Do sign up. Register on our YouTube channel, because, as I think I mentioned last week, the more people, once we hit 1,000, we get free live captions going up on the screen, so you don't have to listen to me. You can just read what I'm talking about. And also, don't forget to send a small donation, whatever it is. You can do it on the website, and no matter how small it is, the more often you do it, the better. But every dollar you say that you send us, as I say, goes to the productions. So you are helping us put the plays back on the stage. Next week, we're going to be talking about the wonderful Irish playwright Sean O'Casey. We're going to be looking at one of his plays in particular, which I've always considered to be the closest thing to a pure Greek tragedy as you're likely to get. O'Casey was not simply a playwright, he was a poet. He was quite remarkable. And to join me to talk about it is somebody who I would consider, in terms of modern Irish theatre, the greatest authority on the topic of O'Casey and that play in particular. And that is the remarkable Joe Dowling, who was former artistic director of the Abbey Theatre, former artistic director of the Guthrie Theatre in Minneapolis, former artistic director of the Irish National Touring Theatre, and who's directed the play. I think we were trying to work it out like 7 or 8 times. So nobody knows this play better than Joe. Joe will be joining me next week. I hope you'll join me next week as well. And in the meantime, bye.